They say a mother's instinct is the strongest force in nature, but nobody tells you about the cold, suffocating weight of a mother-in-law's suspicion. I used to think my life was a fairy tale. I had Mark, a man who looked at me like I was the only star in his sky. And then I had Lily, my beautiful, golden-haired miracle. When Lily was born, I thought our family was finally complete. But looking back, I realized that the day I brought my daughter home was the day my mother-in-law, Evelyn, began her silent war against me. Evelyn was a woman of tradition and legacy. To her, the Sterling family bloodline was sacred, something to be guarded like a crown jewel. From the moment I married Mark, I was an outsider, a girl from a modest background who didn't quite fit the polished upper-class image she had spent decades cultivating. She greeted me with smiles that never reached her eyes and hugs that felt more like she was measuring me for a casket. But when Lily arrived, Evelyn's coldness turned into something sharper, something darker. I remember a quiet Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after the birth. I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep fatigue only a new mother knows. I had just put Lily down for a nap and was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water when I heard a floorboard creak. I stopped. Mark was at work. It should have been just me and the baby. I crept toward the nursery, my heart hammering against my ribs. I peered through the cracked door. There was Evelyn. She wasn't rocking the cradle. She wasn't singing a lullaby. She was standing over my sleeping daughter with a clinical, detached expression. In her hand was a small plastic kit. I watched, paralyzed, as she took a sterile swab and gently, precisely, rubbed it against the inside of Lily's cheek. My blood turned to ice. I knew exactly what that was. A DNA collection kit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burst in there and tear that kit from her hands. But a strange, heavy silence rooted me to the spot. Why? Why would she do this? Mark and I had been together for 6 years. There was never a doubt, never a scandal. But to Evelyn, I was a liar until proven otherwise. She was looking for a reason to discard me, to prove that I had tainted the Sterling name with a child that wasn't theirs. I backed away silently, my breath hitching in my throat. I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. If I confronted her now, she would lie. She would call me paranoid. She would turn Mark against me, claiming she was just protecting him. No, I had to wait. I had to see how far this betrayal went. For the next week, I lived in a state of hypervigilance. Every time Evelyn came over, I felt a physical revulsion. I watched her play the doting grandmother, kissing Lily's forehead with the same lips that had probably just licked an envelope to send away a secret test. She was waiting for the results to destroy my life. What she didn't know was that I had already found the receipt for the private lab in her discarded coat pocket the day after the incident. I felt shattered. The trust I had tried so hard to build was nothing but dust. I looked at Mark, my sweet, oblivious husband, and wondered if he would believe me or his perfect mother. The tension in our house became a living thing, a shadow that stretched across the walls. I felt like I was walking on glass, waiting for the moment it would all shatter. But what I didn't know that day, what I couldn't possibly have guessed, was that Evelyn wasn't just opening a door to my life. She was unlocking a vault that contained her own undoing. She wanted to prove Lily wasn't a Sterling. She was about to find out exactly what it meant to be one. The explosion didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a manila envelope sitting on the mahogany coffee table in Evelyn's living room. She had invited us over for a family dinner. The atmosphere was thick with an unspoken dread. Mark was cheerful, talking about work, while I sat there, my hands trembling beneath the table. I saw the way Evelyn looked at me, triumphant. She had the smug expression of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. "Mark, dear," Evelyn said, her voice smooth as silk and just as cold. "I have something I need to share with the family. It's a matter of integrity." Mark frowned. "Mom, what are you talking about?" She reached for the envelope. "I've had some concerns. About Lily, about our heritage. I did what any responsible matriarch would do. I had a DNA test performed." Quietly, Mark's face went pale. "You did what?" "Mom, that's insane. Why would you—" "Because I knew," she hissed, her mask finally slipping. She turned her venomous gaze toward me. "I knew this girl was hiding something. I knew she wasn't one of us. And now, I have the proof." She threw the papers onto the table. I felt my heart stop. I felt exposed, humiliated, and utterly broken. I looked at Mark, expecting to see anger at me, but he was staring at his mother with pure horror. "Read it, Mark," Evelyn commanded. "Read the results. Show her that her lies are over." Mark picked up the papers with shaking hands. I braced myself for the end of my marriage. I prepared for the world to fall away. But as Mark read, his brow furrowed. He didn't look at me with accusations. He looked at the paper, then at Evelyn, then back at the paper. "Mom," Mark whispered, his voice cracking. "What is this?" "It's the truth," she shouted. "It shows she's not a Sterling." "No," Mark said, standing up. He shoved the paper toward her. "Look at the results, Mom. Look at the paternal markers." Evelyn snatched the paper, her eyes scanning the lines she thought would be my death warrant. But as she read, the color drained from her face until she was as white as the parchment in her hands. She began to shake, not with anger, but with a primal, visceral fear. The results were clear. Lily was indeed my daughter. And she was also Mark's daughter. There was a 99.9% match between Mark and the baby. My fidelity was never the issue. But the lab had done a comparative profile against the grandpaternal DNA. Evelyn had provided from a hair sample of her late husband, Mark's father. The results showed that while Lily was Mark's child, Mark was not the biological son of the man he called father. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The secret Evelyn had buried for 30 years, the secret of her own infidelity, her own betrayal of the Sterling legacy, had just been dragged into the light by her own hand. In her obsession with destroying me, she had accidentally exposed herself. She had spent decades playing the virtuous high society wife, looking down on everyone else, while her entire life was built on a lie. Mark wasn't a Sterling. None of the noble blood she bragged about was in his veins. I watched her. The powerful, terrifying Evelyn Sterling was shrinking before my eyes. She looked small. She looked pathetic. "Mark, I can explain," she stammered, the paper fluttering to the floor. "Explain what?" Mark's voice was like ice. "That you spent my whole life lying to me? That you just tried to destroy my wife and my daughter over a legacy that you knew didn't even exist? You're a hypocrite, Mom. You're a fraud." The shift in me was instantaneous. The pain, the fear, the feeling of being shattered, it evaporated. In its place grew a cold, hard strength. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the witness to her destruction. Mark didn't want explanations. He didn't want her traditions or her money. The man he had idolized, the father he had mourned, was a stranger to him biologically, and the mother he had respected was a stranger to him morally. Evelyn tried to play the victim. She tried to claim she was young and confused back then, that she did it to protect the family estate. But the words rang hollow. She had spent years treating me like dirt beneath her feet for the very sins she had committed herself. Justice didn't come from a courtroom. It came from the silence. Mark packed our things that very night. We didn't scream. We didn't throw things. We simply left. We cut her off entirely. No more Sunday dinners. No more Sterling family gatherings. We changed Lily's last name to my maiden name. We started over, far away from the toxic shadow of Evelyn's mansion. I heard through mutual friends that Evelyn's world crumbled. The secret didn't stay secret for long. In high society circles, gossip is the only currency. And once the word got out that the great Evelyn Sterling was a deceiver, her invitations dried up. The friends who once clamored for her favor suddenly found themselves too busy to take her calls. She was left alone in that big, cold house, surrounded by portraits of a family that didn't truly belong to her. A few months later, I received a letter. It was from Evelyn. It wasn't an apology, it was a plea. She talked about her legacy and how she deserved to see her only grandchild. I sat in my new garden, the sun warming my face, and read her words. I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt pity. She still didn't get it. She thought blood and names were what made a family. She thought power was the same as respect. I walked over to the fire pit where Mark was teaching Lily how to roast her first marshmallow. I tossed the letter into the flames without a word. I watched the paper curl and blacken, the ink of her lies turning to ash. My daughter is happy. She is loved. She is growing up in a home where the truth isn't something to be feared, and where legacy isn't a weapon used to hurt others. She doesn't have the Sterling name, but she has something much better. She has a father who loves her and a mother who will always protect her. Evelyn wanted to use a DNA test to prove I didn't belong. Instead, she proved that she was the only one who never did. The moral of my story is simple. Be careful when you dig for dirt in someone else's garden. You might just find the bodies you buried in your own. Truth has a way of rising to the surface, no matter how much gold you use to weigh it down. And sometimes, the very trap you set for another becomes the cage you spend the rest of your life in. I am no longer the broken girl in the nursery. I am the woman who stood through the storm and came out stronger. I have my peace. And Evelyn, she has her legacy. A legacy of silence, shadows, and the crushing weight of her own secrets.
Please like and subscribe.